there will be time for feasibility, right? The real world will eventually show up and tell you what's possible. It'll whittle down your idea until it is its sharpest and most feasible version possible. But the first day may not be that time. Yeah. So try that.
Hi guys, my name is Tarun and I am the Media Production Manager for Seneca Housing Hackathon 2024. And today we have a very special guest with us, as he is a professor from our partner school, University of Toronto, ISchool, and has done his master's from UofT, underlining the challenge of computer and human interaction. So please help me welcome Professor Velian Pandeliev. So our students would like to know how your interest grew in this field and what do you love to do and how your profession turned into computer and data sciences today.
Good question. Yeah, so I grew up in a very kind of STEM kind of family. My dad's a computer programmer from way back. My mom was a math teacher. And so I was interested in computers from an early age. And as I was looking into what to do for university, I was like, great, computers are cool, but it feels like we're using them for something. The point of computers is to help us do something else. And I wasn't sure that I wanted to stay locked into the machine itself. I wanted to understand how the machine could be used for people and with people. Also, didn't really know what I wanted to do for work necessarily, and so in my undergrad I picked cognitive science, which is both a very interdisciplinary introduction to lots of brain parts, but also linguistics and philosophy, and also, yeah, it helps you kind of push the decisions down the road a ways. And by the time I completed that, the field of human-computer interaction, of user experience, which had been around for a while, was starting to really come into the fore. We were seeing a lot of interesting stuff coming out of Silicon Valley and other places. Social media was changing the way we were doing things, and that was a good time for me to transition into human-computer interaction.
So how joining iSchool and what iSchool does, can you put some light on it?
Sure, yeah. So the Faculty of Information at the University of Toronto is it's a single department faculty, which means that it's basically like a high school, it's a high school-sized kind of self-contained faculty. It comes from library science, archives, things like museum studies, and that's kind of its pedigree. It's been around for many, many years. And recently, as the field of information itself has changed from physical to digital, and the boundaries between those, the impact of storing information, choosing what to store and how to interpret it, what to say instead of what the original is, has led the Faculty of Information into branching out into things like human-centered data science and user experience design. So we have a Masters of Information program, which is split up into these streams between archives or critical information studies and thinking about how does this actually impact the people that we're dealing with, and user experience design is one of those concentrations.
No, so like it's wonderful to have iSchool on board at Seneca. It's like being a partner school at Seneca Hackathon would extremely benefit our participants, especially people learning from this opportunity. So how human-computer interaction, like it would help in solving real-world problems?
Human-computer interaction and how it would help solve real-world problems. Well, if you talk to anybody who practices the profession, and there's a lot of different names for what this space is, right? So there's user-centered design, which is a way of thinking about design. There is user experience design, which is, I like to think of it as the industry professional equivalent to human-computer interaction. And all those fields have their foundations in behavioral psychology, in things like human factors engineering and ergonomics, measuring the human hand span, things like that, in operator error and performance. So pilots and nuclear power plant operators, they all kind of seed this field as it is today. Human conscious designers is we try to understand how this system, whatever it is going to actually be used by somebody. And the way I like to think about it is the interface is the only thing the user actually interacts with. They don't get to touch the code because the code isn't there. They don't get to touch the system itself. They don't even get to talk to the designer or the developer. They only have the flat glass, right, that they are dealing with. So all of the expertise of all these other teams and areas has to somehow make it into the interface to be useful and usable by the user. And I think knowing how to do that and knowing how to collaborate with all those other teams to make sure that their needs, right, their priorities, their business goals are all in there as well is important. And that's, I think, one thing that our field can contribute in this space.
Thank you for that. And moving forward, it's like Seneca Hackathon takes up the challenge to initiate solutions from general public's problem, like being societal issues. So how this collaboration of University of Toronto iSchool and Seneca, what this collaboration will affect the people's life and how it will go further?
Sure. Well, I'm excited to find out, just as you are. A few words about our students. Right. So the Master of Information program is mostly a professional program. Whether they are getting certified to be librarians or museum professionals, that's a Master of Museum Studies program. It's our sibling program, or UXD professionals. They are there to learn a profession. But really, it is always helpful to have more opportunities to meet other people who are also in the professional space, who are also working to network and to build that expertise. The more contexts we can put our students in, the more excited they can be about collaborating with a new group of folks, seeing how things are done somewhere else, the better in my mind. And so the students that you're going to get in the hackathon are going to be UXD students plus something else, right? They're going to be UXD and also they have a bachelor's in health informatics or something else.
Being a Seneca alumni, I would love to join UofT one day. And first of all, the question here arises is how UofT iSchool skills, like they take up various projects in order to address societal problems. So in relation with Seneca Hackathon, what skills and what mindset would be necessary for the students and participants to depict their skills and knowledge?
This is one of the big challenges we have when we teach our students, because as you can imagine, they come into the program and they say, I would just tell me the things I need to get a job. That's a perfectly reasonable thing to ask. And we're like, great, but the job you're imagining today may not exist in 5 years. The practical skills here are extremely important and they're going to let you learn new things. They're going to let you transition into the next stage of this industry. But you need some theory, you need some foundations, you need to step back from the templates, step back from the software that we're using, step back from the color contrast and the hex codes for colors, and think about, why are we doing this? Right? When we do it this way, who does it benefit? And is there anybody that it does not benefit? Is there anybody that we are accidentally harming, right? Or that we haven't thought about, that is impacted by this thing that we made? And some of the thinking I would love for our students to bring in, and I would love for all teams to consider, is taking a step back and thinking about, if I was telling somebody in an elevator what this is about, would they find it interesting or would they find it a little strange? And that comes from thinking about those things, right? Thinking about taking the skills that are extremely important in the practical and being able to understand why you're picking this template and not that template. Or why this thing that you think is easy is actually not that easy. But in terms of their programming ability, they may not have actually had a programming course before. And so sometimes they'll be like, great, I have a great design idea. It is a black box algorithm that will solve it all and we're good. And I'm like, awesome, but I can't evaluate that because it doesn't exist, right? So if you have a technical solution, if you have an algorithmic solution, I'd love to see it mocked up or I'd love to see it prototyped somehow. And otherwise, tell me how a user is going to learn about this, how they're going to be able to access it, how they're going to feel secure giving that algorithm their data. And that's going to be better success in my mind.
Surely, Professor, surely your points matter to us, because Seneca Hackathon has always been standing, breaking the barriers for traditional hackathons, not being just for technical people, but they have a solution and they want to change the world. Thank you. We want you on board. So that is a very important thing. And you being a student, transitioning and becoming a professor, so what your message will be to students in addressing real world problems?
I like to think of myself as still a student and still a learner, right? Whatever influence we have over our students is brief and passing, right? I would love to know that by the end of a 2-year degree, they don't care what I think, right? Like they will have come to a point where they have their own compass for what is ethical, right? What is helpful in the world, and also what is technically correct and sensible. The question about, what advice do I have and how do I direct people into the world? It's easy for me to say, do only what you're comfortable doing. Do only things that help in the world. The reality is that life is always complex. There are always things you're doing that are under different kinds of constraints. You're working for an employer that has a different set of priorities, or that may not have thought about something, or that there may not be time to actually use your training and implement that improvement. But being mindful, spending some of your resource, some of your time thinking about that high-level impact. Who is this for? Who is being excluded? Is there a way to bring more people in? Because we might be designers or programmers or whatever we are, but we exist in the world. We see the problems in the world. And the first thing that happens is we go, this isn't good. I wish there was some way to fix it. There was something I could do. And often there's not much that any individual can do, but talking about it, thinking about it, pushing where we can is the way to, look, progress is progress, right? And that's very valuable. And we should never lose the hope.
Like the things that we see today, like various apps, various technical things, was sometime an idea and now it's a reality. And the points you said motivated me to just enroll in your class. Being in your class would actually give me more insights on how you teach and how you see a world, because learning from different people's opinions give you purpose of life. So how would you define that these two fields help in help in education of a person?
I want to be clear, my experience with video games is extensive as a casual player, and somewhat limited as a designer. I don't have any games to my name. I worked in the video game industry for a bit as a researcher. Right? So I watched people play games and tried to find out what issues they were encountering, right? And the whole point of all of that was the same point as any other design, which was, is the intent of the design actually happening in the world? That's that research component of user experience that is really valuable. It's the way to peek into the future with a few people and see, hey, is this game going to be fun? Is it going to be what we hoped it would be? And so setting the difficulty of the challenges we set our students is very similar to level design and challenge design for video games. And if you set it too high, there's just no way they can make that leap. If you set it too low, it's trivial, and they don't need to actually think about and engage with the thing they just learned. They don't need what you just taught them because they can just muscle through on their own. And so the effects of gamification in that sense are a little more subtle in education than I often see them portrayed. So you'll see, if you're in elementary school and they're like, oh, it's math game time this week, and you go in and you're like, okay, this looks like a game, but I know it's actually math. Like, you're trying to trick me into learning math, even though it looks nice and it's got pretty bubbles. We have to be a little careful not to over rely on those external trappings. In terms of artistic media, in terms of things that we consume, this is interactive.
Thank you. And I see that books are written from experiences, and your experience speaks for itself, Professor. So moving forward and more into gamification, it's like how gamification can be proportionately be possible with housing challenges that we face today.
What's the point of gamification? What's the benefit of gamification? It is getting folks to engage with something that they wouldn't otherwise engage with. It's making something fun that wasn't fun before. It's getting them connected with other people, getting them into a habit, perhaps. We see that in fitness applications, sometimes in social stuff. We see that in augmented reality games, whether they have a map on top of a map, or they're just, go to this location and do something cool. In terms of housing, gamification can't build more houses. It can't make houses more affordable. What it can do is it can change the way we think about the places we live, about the neighborhoods we inhabit. Because some neighborhoods feel cohesive, they feel like they have a spirit, it feels like walking around and encountering your neighbors is a benefit, is fun and interesting. And there are also there are problems that games cannot solve, no matter how exciting and fun they are. And I'm excited to see our teams kind of find the difference and approach it in interesting ways.
Yeah, I would say after this podcast, I can say a team would consider making a game on this challenge. So what do you think, like being in a team, what skill set, what mindset, and what knowledge they would require to perform as a team and give the best possible solution to the society in housing?
Teamwork is tough. We all know that teamwork is tough. Anytime most things we have to do with others. And I have advice for my groups and for my students. A lot of our students work in groups, of course. Some of the advice I have is domain specific. So for example, I find it very valuable that I learned some programming, right? I have a degree in computer science, and even though the programming I did is not optimized, it isn't systems programming, it isn't all these things, and I don't do any programming now, what this does is it helps me talk to developers and understand some of the limitations they may have. I understand what it takes to go and access a database for this kind of query versus a different kind of query. And our students can be focused on their field. They can be really heads down about it and level up in it, which is great. But at some point, they're going to have to interact with others. I wish I knew who coined this. We use it in our work integrated learning work. The idea of the T-shaped professional, somebody who has breadth of understanding of a few different fields and is extremely specialized in one in particular. That's kind of their focus. So that's domain specific. And that's on the domain side. That's on the what do we know and what do we do. In terms of working with any people, there's this whole extra layer of the social side. How do you learn about a new team quickly? How do you get what you want while making sure you're not feeling like you're taking something away from them? How do you manage those sessions? And this applies both to peer teams. So if you have a hackathon team where everybody's on equal footing, it also applies to teams where you might have somebody in a position of power with you or around you, right? Or different stakeholders pulling in different directions. It's valuable to talk about those things. It's valuable to spend the first half an hour together, whether you know each other from way back or you're forming a team for this hackathon. Spend half an hour talking about, hey, what do you like? What if we had these stages to the hackathon, if we had these aspects, technology, design, business sense, competitor analysis, which of those things would you like to lead us in? Because what many teams lack, strangely enough, is that sense of leadership. When everybody is like, I hope somebody does what we need to do. And I think I know what it is, but I don't want to speak up because I'm just one of many. Yeah. And the more people you have on the team, the harder that is. And so rotate that responsibility. And maybe not everybody wants it. Someone will be like, I would love to not lead any of these, but I'm going to contribute heavily to these. Understand what you're good at and how you would like to work. Talk about those things to start. And then assign yourselves and each other the parts that you're good at, be responsible for them. That way you know that you can push them forward and there's a way to look to someone to make a final decision, which it's not going to be the best. We're never at the best. At the end of a hackathon or at the end of a 10-year sprint, it really doesn't matter how long it takes. Anything can always be improved, but making a decision and moving on and being able to validate and change and update that decision is more valuable than getting stuck in this space where nobody really knows how to proceed from here. So that's my advice to teams, whether they are new teams or they've worked together before.
That's such a wonderful advice, Professor. And it comes from experience, from knowledge that is depicted. Now, if we move forward, like participating in such events like hackathon, how does it help a professional to develop himself or herself, being industry ready, updating their professional life or their resumes or getting jobs, because it's hard right now. Mm-hmm. So what do you think, and what do you think this type of events, participating in that, brings to the table personally and professionally?
Hackathons are cool. Hackathons are very interesting. What happens is you take the kind of expertise that it might take you 6 months right? To the kinds of problems that might take you 6 months to work through at a regular pace, and you condense it into a week, into 2 weeks, into a very, very fast thing. The point of a hackathon is not necessarily the final product. The final product is rushed, right? It is sprinted towards. It's a great first version of something. The benefit, though, is that in that short amount of time, you're exposed to a lot of problems, to a lot of viewpoints, both from your teammates, from other teams you're working near, and that's where, even though it's a competitive environment, I recommend that you focus on the collegial and the collaborative aspect of it. You're in competition with these other students now, and you may be in competition for jobs, but really it's much more valuable to know somebody somewhere than it is to feel like you're always in competition with everybody, which leads us into the idea of networking. Having events like this where some things are very constrained, time is constrained, the topic is constrained, but some things are free to vary and free to churn, and it's also another safe way to do it. Right? It's another way where the worst that will happen is you won't make the finals. You will have done something cool, you will have met some people, and that's always a benefit, that's always a value. And the best thing that can happen is you could be the next big startup, or you could get funding for stuff, you could get a prize, you could get the mentorship and the eyes of people you can learn from, both people we think of as in positions of authority, our judges, our mentors, and also other people who anybody can teach you things, and that's really valuable.
Thank you, Professor. That was truly mentioned, and as you said, your network is your net worth nowadays. Thank you for your words, Professor. Now, moving forward, I would like to know your personal opinion, like being a student, then transitioning into a career and becoming a professor, being a Canadian citizen. What do you think about housing challenges and housing issues that you face, and now what's the case? Your personal opinion on that?
Housing is tough. Think about housing and think about most of these, the best topics, the best themes for things like hackathons, things like design assignments, is things that we can all relate to. And housing is one of those universal things. We all need housing. And each of us has a story, right? Has a problem from the past or a problem from the present about housing. And of course, there's other topics like that. It feels like a lot of the challenges we are facing are not solvable by design. They're not solvable by individuals. They're not even solvable by money necessarily. Going back to gamification, if you think of the world as a giant game, the incentive system, right, the things that are being rewarded at the moment, right, have to do with housing both as a thing people need and also as some kind of commodity, a thing to invest in, a thing to derive value or profit from. Right. And that's true for lots of people you don't think of as in big investment companies or anything like that. It's true for anybody who bought a house expecting that house to not depreciate in value, right? Anybody who poured 40 years of work into paying a mortgage, and now that mortgage is paid, and that means something. That means you have that value. Some things could be solved by design. They could be solved by individuals. And those things have more to do with the priorities we have as a society and the priorities we push our representatives to have. They have to do with making sure that things get built and that those things are able to be found and rented or sold to people who need housing. As individuals, it's important to remember the core purpose of housing. Right? What is housing for?
What's housing for, right?
And housing is for housing. It's so that you have a place to live. But making sure that everyone has a place to live to start is not only seems morally helpful and beneficial, it is also potentially less expensive, right, than some of the other options that we have tried or decided not to intervene against. And so as individuals, we have somewhat limited power. The levers we pull are very small in the world, but we can see these problems and we can think about where we can best apply our limited effort, right, towards solving them.
Okay. So diving deeper into the field, like as you mentioned, like gamification and user interface, like what people expect. So like for our techie guys or technical friends out there, what do you think should be a best idea to address these issues at their level. Like everybody can make a change, but they have to start somewhere. So what they should do?
Our techie friends are going to be disappointed with my answer. There is a tendency to solve problems with the skill sets that we have. And in the last 20 years, especially, this notion of technology solutionism, the idea that there's a problem, and if I just make the right app, if I make the right matching service, that problem could be solved. It could go away. It's a very tempting proposal. And it sometimes works. And sometimes it really doesn't. Sometimes technology is not what you need. It's just what is easiest to develop right now.
Yeah.
Right? So changing society, changing culture is harder than knocking out a matching service. With that said, technology has a role to play because it is being used on the other side. It is being used to do things like play with prices, right? To make sure that whoever's selling a thing gets the best price for it. And if you are selling a thing, that's great for you. But what are some technologies that could protect consumers, that could protect buyers or protect renters at the same time? There is lots of gaps in the space. If I'm renting and I have questions from my property manager, or something has happened, or that relationship can always be improved. I can ring them up. Hopefully, I can ring them up. If not, I might have a portal where I can submit a ticket and do a thing. Is there anything in that space, right, that could be approached from a technology standpoint?
Surely, Professor, surely, like being in a direct or whether being in direct relationship with the crisis, I think technology has a very important role to play. So, like, we are nearing the end of our podcast in the episode. So, what advice would you like to give our participants or like prospective participants or students in order to take up the challenge, solve the problems, and participate in these kind of events more?
Mm-hmm. You're going to get a lot of great advice from lots of mentors and lots of people. A lot of it is going to be technical, right? Here's how to present well. Here's how to do this good work. Here's how to bootstrap something. You don't have to have it be perfect for this stage. The advice I want to give you is about the very first day, the first part of your solution idea. And that is to be bold, to dream at first. When we do ideation, when we do brainstorming, it is really important not to zero in on what is feasible or what we feel is the most, the thing that is coming up as a front runner too soon. You want to make sure that you are designing the thing right or building the thing right, for sure. But before you do that, it's useful to know that you are designing the right thing, that you are climbing the correct hill. And sometimes wild, strange ideas can lead to, can be grafted. Two wild, strange ideas can make a very plausible, useful thing. Or an idea from a different domain, right, can be used here to do something cool. Or an idea that is absolutely impossible and not feasible, kind of wild, a little funny, can spark you into thinking about something that is actually possible. I'm trying to think of an example right now. One initiative, and I'm sure there's a few of these, and I don't remember the name of the company, unfortunately, but a recent initiative has found that it might be possible to pair students, post-secondary students, with older adults, right? As a housing match. Instead of matching them to landlords or to companies or to student dorms, they're matching them to older adults who may have more living space than they necessarily need. They may appreciate the companionship and the occasional, hey, I'm going to the grocery store, do you want anything? Right? So there may be some synergies, some interesting combinations of things that we could play with that we might miss if we are designing the next Realtor.ca, the next, View It, the next Craigslist. And so my advice to folks is, alongside all the other good advice you get, is zero in on your solution slowly, right? Discard ideas slowly to start, because there will be time for feasibility, right? The real world will eventually show up and tell you what's possible. It'll whittle down your idea until it is its sharpest and most feasible version possible. But the first day may not be that time. So try that.
So just last thing, can you give an innovative word for our Seneca Hackathon for our students? Just one word. Define Seneca Hackathon in one word.
One innovative word.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Here we go. Let's work on it together, shall we?
Let's
think about it. So, what I'd love to leave you folks with is the idea that a competition might only have one winner, might only have a handful of finalists, but you yourself, at the end of it, you will feel accomplished if you've done the best work that you could have done with the time that you had. Maybe the word is something like win or push, right? Or excel.
Yeah.
Do the best work that you can do for this and for everything else. It's not always possible. There's all kinds of other things that could happen, but if we don't believe in ourselves, if we don't believe that we are doing our best work, who will? Who else is supposed to?
So folks, for this episode, we have a learning. Win or push to excel. Learn that.
That was great. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor. Thank you. So this is our end of the podcast.